Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I'm here with my July wrap up. So all the books that I read in July, I actually read 15 books in July, which is a pretty decent number for me. And so the first book that I read in July that I finished was They Were Her Property, White Women as Slave Owners in the American South by Stephanie E. Jones Rogers. When I was looking back at the list of like the first books I finished in July, it was such a shock to see this book because it felt like such a long time ago that I read it. But it is a wonderful history of female slave owners in the South. Like the author explains that women have often been left out of the story of slavery in the South because they didn't have as much power as white men, right? It was a patriarchal and racialized society in which maleness and whiteness put you at the very top of the chain. But what she shows you is that women forged an identity based on their ownership of slaves and actually carved out autonomous ownership of their slaves. And she goes through this history in a really accessible way. If you're interested in the topic, this is a really good book to read. Fantastic history, fantastic archival research, but also written in a way that is really accessible to a lot of readers. So I highly, highly recommend They Were Her Property. The next book that I finished in July was Iron Kiss by Patricia Briggs. This is book number 3 in the Mercy Thompson series, and I really loved this book. I'm really loving the Mercy Thompson series because it feeds my love of plot. Like there's just so much plot in these books. A lot is happening. The sexual tension between the people involved in the love triangle is fantastic. And yeah, like I just want to keep reading. Now there's a major content warning for this book. Fortunately, I knew I had seen someone say it beforehand, so I knew it was coming, and I actually delayed reading this book because of this content warning. It is a bit of a spoiler alert, but if you are someone who looks for content warnings, look down in the description. When I list the titles of the book, I will list the content warning right below the title of the book because I think it could be really triggering for some people, and I wouldn't want to do that. I thought that it was handled really brilliantly though. The next book that I finished in July was The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, which I buddy read with Priscilla over at Bookie Charm, and this is such a wonderful series. I really love this whole Poppy War series. And The Dragon Republic was really wonderful. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars only because there's a section in the middle that like lasts a little bit too long. That's a lot of military plot. And if you don't like military plots, like this kind of series might not be for you because there's a lot of that. But it's also a great balance of character development, a political intrigue, and like mixture of like the historical setting in here. That's what attracted me to the series to begin with, was the fact that R.F. Kuang really understands her Chinese history even better than I do, right? But she integrates it in this fantastical world, and like the result is brilliant. It's just brilliant. And Rin as a character is she's complex, and like Priscilla and I talked about this, about how you're not meant to like Rin because she makes a lot of shitty choices, a lot of, does a lot of bad things, but she's also a teenager. Like at times I had to go back and remind myself that she's a teenager for a large chunk of the novel set, and she's really taking on an adult role, making adult decisions, and so of course they're going to be not so great decisions, but anyways, so this is the second book in the series, and it is fantastic. I can't say too much without revealing it, except that if you have been interested in this series, you need to pick it up and read it. It reads really fast too. Priscilla and I had like a schedule of how we were going to read it, and then we both ended up just binging the last like 100 pages because you just cannot stop yourself. It's very readable, but also lots of content warnings because we're in the second book, it's all warfare all the time. So there's a lot of violence. There's sexual assault on the page. There is discussions of suicide. There's a lot of content warnings in this book, so it is not for everybody. But if that sounds interesting, like, I really do recommend The Poppy War and the whole series. Book 3 is coming out soon, and can't wait to read that. All right, the next couple of books that I finished in July, I'm not going to talk a lot about, but I read The Butterfly Bride by Vanessa Riley and The Bewildered Bride by Vanessa Riley. This is part of the Advertisements for Love series, and I have an entire video that I just posted this month on this series on my channel. If you are interested, it is a Regency romance with Black and interracial characters. Vanessa Riley is doing something very unique in Regency romance, in that she's being entirely historically accurate by including Black characters in here. And a lot of romance readers have been critical of authors that include Black characters in the Regency romances, thinking that Black people didn't exist in Regency England, but they certainly did. And that was, anyways, I talk more about that in that individual video, but the last 2 books in the series were some of the best in the series. The next book that I finished in July was Exhalation by Ted Chiang. This is a series of sci-fi short stories, and I love this book. I loved it so much that I actually read it from my library and had to order the physical copy, because there is at least one story in here that I know I can use in one of the classes that I teach, because of the way it deals with, like, the idea of, well, so many themes. I'm still playing with the idea of doing an individual review video on this book, because there's just so many wonderful themes in here. A lot of the questions of humanity and our relationship with technology, the humanity in AI, our relationship to language and history, like, so many. And some of the short stories in here are very short. There's a couple that are a little bit longer, but the way they are arranged and spaced out, it was brilliant, because you get some short stories and then a longer one, short stories and longer one. It was just really, really, really wonderful. Fantastic. If you're into sci-fi, you need to read this book. Period. Nothing else to say there. The next book was an audiobook. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. So this is one of those, like, anti-racist primers, one of these, like, introductory books. This one in particular focuses on, hey, you are probably already interested in issues of race, but how do you have conversations about race with people who maybe haven't had these conversations before, who might be resistant to these conversations? Like, here's some information, some topics, some background, so that you can have those conversations. And I think for what the book sets out to do, it does excellent. I think this is one of those great books to start off with, if you're on a journey to develop your anti-racism. So I really enjoyed it. For part of it, my boyfriend was, like, listening to part of it, and he was getting stuff out of it just listening to, like, bits and pieces where I was around. So yeah, I recommend it if you're interested in the topic. The next book I finished in July was The Black God's Drums by Djeli Clark. Hope I pronounced that right. If I did not, feel free to correct me down below. This is a awesome sci-fi fantasy short story. So first of all, thank you to Shannon over at That's a Poe for recommending both Exhalation and this one, The Black God's Drum, because it is set in New Orleans. It is kind of a historical New Orleans after the Civil War, but here's the thing. I know a little bit about the history of New Orleans, because New Orleans is a really interesting location, because it was colonized by different groups, and it ends up being a really important port city at, during the slave trade. And it gets infused and influenced by so many different cultures, that it was a truly like multiracial place, a place where like kind of anything went, and where you can see like kind of a little bit of anything. So the author just did such a wonderful job of bringing out that history in the story that I was just in love. I am giving it 4 out of 5 stars because part of the problem with the short story was that it's too short. Like, she created this world that was beautiful, right? The world created here was intricate, beautiful. The characters are super interesting, and then it ends. You're left wanting a lot more. And so I saw that in a lot of the reviews of this short story, and I very much agreed that it needed more. But I was just so in love with the way history was brought up in this short story that I really loved it. You have the story of a young girl who overhears these two people talking about how they have something that's really important, and she wants to get on this ship. Right, she wants to be like personnel on this ship. So she goes to the captain of the ship and she's like, "Hey, I have information you're going to be interested in. Here's the information." A whole plot ensues. And yeah, there we go. The next book that I finished in July was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I have a whole dedicated review of this video. I loved it. If you love slow burn suspense, this is the book for you. In fact, somebody in my comments in that video said it's deliciously slow burn, and it's like, yeah, you have to like slow burn, because for 2/3 of the book it feels like nothing happens, like there's not a ton of plot. But if you're interested in the characters and the setting, like that will hold your attention, and I definitely was. So slow burn Gothic horror set in 1950s Mexico. There you go. that is my like short version of I'm selling this book to you. The next book I finished was Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This is a modern romance, and Talia Hibbert is like one of my new favorite writers, because there's so much spark and happiness in her writing in this book that I just fell in love. This was a 5-star read for me. I think this is an example of how awesome romance can be. There is disability representation. Our main character deals with chronic illness, and like takes us through what that means for her. The hero, Red, is fantastic, a good listener, a good communicator. There are discussions here of mental health and therapy, which I loved. The spicy parts are spicy good, and it's just like, again, one of those examples of like romance at its best can do and does do. So if that has been on your list, pick it up, like seriously. I know this book has gotten a lot of hype, and it is entirely deserved. The next book that I finished in July was Kintu by Jennifer Marcumbe, and so this was the read-along book for Read So Lit, hosted by Didi over at Brown Girl Reading. This is an amazing book. I want to assign it to my world history classes. The only barrier is that it's long. It is long, and I read the ebook, so I didn't have like the physical like thickness to scare me away. But it is a series of stories. You're following a multi-generational story of different family members, right, in the Kintu line, and you're also getting the history of Uganda. It is, I was read some literary reviews of this book because it's classified as like the Ugandan novel, and it's very post-colonial in that there you definitely see the effects of colonialism in Uganda in this story. But this story doesn't focus on that. Like, it doesn't focus on the colonialism or on the colonists. It's very much focused on this one family and the curse that they live with. So you start off with how basically the story of Kintu and how he gets cursed, like what he does that gets him cursed, and then you follow different family members as they deal with this curse and show you, give you snapshots of life in Uganda. It's beautifully written, and it does not cater to a Western audience in the same way that a lot of books do. Like, one of the things in the story is that some characters have multiple names, and this was a big worry when publishing it in the US. Like, will American readers be able to handle that? And here's the thing, like, why the hell not? Why the hell not? You know, I'm not somebody who worries about multiple names. I don't have to get everything exactly right as I'm reading it. So that did not bother me at all. I am thinking about that on whether I assigned it or not to classes, because students tend to be really specific about those things. So we'll see. But it's a brilliant book that I think you should read. And go over to Dee Dee's channel, because for the live show, I participated in the chat for that. It was just really wonderful as they broke down the themes of the book, and then the author showed up and just like gave a master class on writing. And yeah, just go watch it. The next book I finished in July was inspired by Shannon, again over at That's a Poe, and our reading of Mexican Gothic, because while we didn't buddy read it, we both finished it around the same time, and so we were able to chat about it. And she recommended reading The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It's a really short novelette, super short, like I think I read it in an hour and a half, that it's a Gothic feminist story, and it's about a yellow wallpaper. If you read Mexican Gothic, you know why wallpaper is important. And Shannon was talking about how Silvia Moreno-Garcia must have been inspired by this novel, or at least influenced by it. And yeah, once you read it, definitely, because there's definitely feminist, creepy themes in Mexican Gothic that directly relate to the themes in The Yellow Wallpaper. Then I read Before We Were Free. This is a story set in the Dominican Republic during the dictatorship of Trujillo. This is a middle grade book, and I really liked it. It was not a perfect story because it's told from the perspective of, like, you know, a young kid. So she's noticing and seeing things that she doesn't fully understand, but we kind of do, and it can be frustrating that, like, the character doesn't understand it. It's definitely a great book for young kids to read, but even for adults, if you want to, you know, read something set in the Caribbean, this was fantastic because it introduces you to a little bit of that history through the eyes of this well-to-do family, and you get to see how hard it was for people, even for wealthy or privileged people during the Trujillo dictatorship. So I enjoyed it. There we go. 2 more books to go. I then read The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is book 1 in a trilogy that I now must read, but they're all like big chunkers. So July was a month for me to not shy away from chunkers, because the Dragon Republic, and then I was like, yeah, why the hell not? Let's pick up The Fifth Season. I'm in a big, like, fantasy sci-fi binge lately, and The Fifth Season it lives up to all the hype. Like, this is one of those books when you're talking about fantasy stories, it gets mentioned a lot, and I understand why now. Part 1 was a little bit hard to get through for me, because right at the beginning, you're dumped into a world that already exists. It's a full-fledged world. Things are already happening, and you're like, whoop, gotta figure out where I'm at and what's happening, who these people are. And it took me a little while to fully get that, but once I was in, after part 1, it was go, go, go. And there's enough happening, so enough plots, there's enough character development, and the way there's different stories. You start off basically with different storylines, and then everything starts coming together, and the way it all comes together is so brilliant. The themes here about humanity and the other, science and faith and beliefs and family. I just like, wow, like I love this world. I love N.K. Jemison's writing, and like I want to keep going in there. It did feel like a really dark book to me because it just reinforced like a lot of my negativity about the world in its current state. Like humanity is like cursed. And when I read the story, I was like, this world is not so far-fetched. We're gonna end up with this kind of situation, and we're all screwed basically. So it was kind of in a dark place, and that's kind of also why like I read it. I think I read this in a week, and I wanted to read it quickly because it put me in a very dark mood, and I was like, let's just finish it and get out of the dark mood. And you know, after being in that dark mood, I went to romance for a while because that's the proper order of things. So the last book I finished in July was Beverly Jenkins' Forbidden. This is the first in her Old West series, and this is fantastic. It's such a cute, fantastic story. I love historicals. They were my introduction to romance, and Beverly Jenkins is a master of the historical romance. Like, you can tell that there was so much research done in this book. You're following a black couple in Nevada. That's where they are. So everything's all like, you know, things are still being figured out. People are moving out west. Our main character, Eddie, is moving west. She wants to come to California to start her own restaurant, and she is in Denver, and things are not panning out for her there, so she's heading to California. And then everything bad that could happen happens to poor Eddie. But she ends up in this town where Ryan owns the local saloon, and Ryan was slave born. Eddie was born free. Her parents had been freed by their master. But Ryan was born a slave, but his skin is light enough that he can pass as white. He's basically been using that so that he can attain wealth and power and help out the population of black people in his town. And so, like, a lot of important historical, political themes are in the story, and yet it's still like focused on this romance, this beautiful romance, and I loved it. I loved it. Eddie is one of those characters that, like, she has her values, she knows what she's worth, and she is not gonna make stupid decisions. You know, she's gonna make decisions that reinforce her values and her goals, and the fact that she can do that and still end up with the guy at the end was fantastic. So that's all the books I read in July. If I went through them too fast, let me know which you'd like to hear more about down below, and I'm always willing to talk more about them. But it was a fantastic reading month. I hope you all had a fantastic reading month. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you're planning on reading any of these, or let me know what you read that was really great in July so that I can continue growing my TBR list. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.